They stonewall you, shut down, go silent, disappear from the conversation. You feel rejected. You think they don't care. Wrong. They're waiting for you to do something, and it's not what you think. In this video, I'll be blunt. When an avoidant goes silent, they're not hoping you'll beg, not hoping you'll text a dozen times or send long explanations. They're secretly hoping you'll do what few people can. Stay calm, not panic. I'm going to break down exactly what's happening in their mind. The overwhelm of closeness, the old wounds that make them fear emotional engulfment, and why their silence isn't rejection, it's an unspoken SOS. And if you respond like someone secure, clear, grounded, unshaken, you won't just protect your self-worth. You'll make them feel something rare, safe. Ready? Hit subscribe and stay until the end. Because this isn't about winning someone back. It's about winning yourself back in the face of the silence you once feared most. When an avoidant partner stonewalls, you goes silent, withdraws, or shuts down, your first instinct might be, they just don't care anymore. But that's not entirely true. Stonewalling isn't just coldness or indifference. It's a survival response, a defense mechanism rooted in childhood, where they learned, no one's coming to help. I have to rely on myself. And so they cope by shutting down emotionally, especially when a relationship begins to require real intimacy. This is the avoidance core wound, the fear that letting someone get too close will mean losing control, losing freedom, and ultimately getting hurt. I'm not saying this so you'll feel sorry for them. I'm saying this so you'll understand their behavior is not your fault. Sometimes what you see as closeness, making future plans, asking for more time together registers to them as a threat, not because you're wrong, but because they never learned how to stay when love gets deep. This can easily pull you into self-doubt. Am I too much? Did I scare them away? Should I stay quiet and wait for them to come back? But self-respect means refusing to become a test. You are not here to prove you're not a burden. You do not have to shrink your needs just to keep someone from running. Remember this. Stonewalling is not a sign that you're asking too much. It's a sign they're not equipped to engage responsibly. A mature partner doesn't withdraw as punishment or escape. They say, I'm overwhelmed. I need some time to process, but I'm still here, and I'll return to talk. Unfortunately, not everyone has that skill. That's why this video isn't just about understanding them. It's a reminder for you. Real love requires clarity. You deserve presence, effort, and emotional consistency. And you don't need to chase silence to prove your worth. I say this not to keep you hoping in them, but to help you begin hoping in yourself. You can choose differently. You can love without losing yourself. And it starts with understanding, followed by courageous action. And if you've ever wondered, why are they like this? Why can't they just stay and work through things with me? The answer doesn't lie in the present. It lies deep in the past. This is where we must look back into their childhood, where the first building blocks of emotional connection were laid. Clinical social worker Erica Kazar once pointed out a crucial truth many overlook. Emotional regulation is not automatic. It must be taught, and it's only learned if the caregiver helps co-regulate the child's emotions during the first 3 years of life. During this critical window, 85% of the right brain, the part responsible for feeling safe, develops. Without a consistent caregiver helping the child process fear, sadness, or distress, the nervous system never learns what safety feels like. For a child raised in emotional chaos or neglect, life feels like being dropped into a stormy ocean without a captain. So they learn to survive by suppressing emotion, not because they're cold, but because feeling too much was dangerous. They begin to internalize painful lessons. If I hope, I'll be let down. If I need, I'll be abandoned. If I soften, I'll be hurt. So they build a system of protection, and in adulthood, we recognize it as stonewalling. And the hardest part? That reflex isn't always conscious. It's wired into their nervous system. Withdrawal equals safety. Emotional shutdown equals survival. It's hard to blame someone for a behavior they barely understand, but it's even harder and riskier to keep sacrificing your self-respect in hopes they'll change on their own. This understanding isn't here to justify suffering, but to help you see the full picture. They're not bad people. They're people who never learned how to love safely. But don't confuse compassion with self-sacrifice. You can have empathy for their story without becoming a character in it. Here's the truth. They learn to detach to survive. You, the anxious partner, learn to cling to avoid abandonment. Together, that creates a dance of exhaustion. One runs, the other chases. But you don't have to keep dancing. You can't go back and heal their past. But you can choose to act differently in the present, with clarity, with dignity, and by asking, am I loving them, or trying to fix a wound that was never mine to heal? Understanding their childhood roots helps us look at them with more compassion, but that's only half the picture. The other half lies in the present. What are they hoping for when they stonewall you? The answer might surprise you. Contrary to the common belief that they don't care anymore, the truth is avoidants still want connection. They just want it in a way that feels safe to them. This is something few people realize. While they're pulling back, they're quietly watching how you respond. They won't admit this, perhaps they're not even fully aware, but deep down, they hope you don't chase them, and yet you don't disappear entirely. They hope you'll be calm enough to hold steady, patient enough not to pressure them, as if to say, I'm not invading your space, but I'm also not abandoning you. Oh, for avoidance, feeling pursued, pressured, or demanded often triggers the same panic that once came from emotional chaos, a loss of control. This is why they stonewall, to escape rising emotions, to self-regulate without interference. But if your response is to criticize, send multiple texts, or demand clarity, you may inadvertently push them further into retreat. However, their silence doesn't mean they don't feel anything. Many avoidants later admit that during stonewalling, they were still watching, reading messages without replying, thinking about the person they distanced from, wondering, are they still waiting for me? They crave emotional safety, yet don't know how to love without their familiar armor. This doesn't mean you should excuse emotional withdrawal, but it does mean your response shouldn't be to force a conversation, but to create an atmosphere they want to return to, like the classic boiling frog metaphor. If you throw the frog into boiling water, it jumps out. But if the water is warm and the heat increases gradually, it stays not because it's trapped, but because it doesn't feel threatened. I'm not suggesting you boil anyone, but this metaphor helps us understand one thing. Avoidants don't react badly to connection. They react to sudden shifts. What they fear isn't love, it's being rushed into a place they're not ready for. So ask yourself, is the relationship moving too fast for their nervous system to feel safe? If so, your response shouldn't be to speed things up to secure them, but to steady your pace and observe. And here's the most important part. You don't do this to manipulate them into returning. You do this because you've matured enough not to let someone else's avoidance define your worth. You practice patience not to keep them, but to keep your center, because if someone's withdrawal can cause you to collapse, then the relationship was never built on solid ground. Giving them space isn't surrender, it's a declaration, I won't control you, but I also won't accept half presence. And when the avoidant senses that balance of freedom with boundaries, they may finally return with respect, not because you chased them back, but because they chose to come home. If deleting photos was his way of protecting himself through silence, then when you break that silence by texting to check in or trying to talk things out, you may be shocked to receive anger, coldness, or even aggression in return. 3, he becomes quick to anger or overreacts because you're disrupting the emotional avoidance he's desperately trying to maintain. This is one of the most misunderstood signs. You might think, if he still cares, why is he lashing out? Or, I just want to talk, why does he act like I'm attacking him? The answer lies in the emotionally unprocessed chaos within an avoidantly attached person. When you reach out even kindly, you're touching a part of him that he's trying to lock away. And because he doesn't know how to open that door safely, the pressure builds up and explodes in the form of anger. But here's the thing, this anger isn't truly about you. It's an emotional convulsion seeking release, aimed at the nearest target. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, once said, unexpressed emotions will never die. They are buried alive and will come forth later in uglier ways. And anger, in many cases, is a manifestation of repressed emotional tension that hasn't been recognized or metabolized. According to Freud, The human psyche is made up of three components: the id, instincts, the ego, self, and the superego, conscience. In avoidant individuals, the ego is often underdeveloped, lacking the capacity to mediate between raw emotional needs, id, and the inner critic or fear of losing control, superego. What results is inner conflict, and anger is the flashpoint of that disorder. So when he lashes out, remember, it's not about you. It reveals his internal fear and fragmentation. You are not the cause. You are simply the emotional trigger for something he hasn't been able to face. And this is where your self-respect must rise. You do not need to endure emotional outbursts to prove your love. You don't need to knock on a locked door just to be met with coldness. Mature love recognizes that anger is not a measure of care, it is a symptom of unhealed wounds. If he truly wanted to heal, he'd learn how to name his emotions, not project them onto you. And if he can't, then it's not your job to carry his chaos. You are not walking away because you lack patience. You're walking away because you love yourself enough not to stay where you're being hurt. Freud emphasized that awareness is the first step to freedom from internal fixation. The more clearly you see what's really happening, the less likely you are to be swept up in someone else's storm. You weren't born to be a container for emotions someone else refuses to process. So next time he reacts with anger when you simply want connection, take a step back. Not out of fear, but because you're strong enough not to get pulled into a battle that isn't yours. We've explored the silence of the avoidant and how it's not indifference, but a silent plea. Give me time. Don't push me, but don't leave me. Now we reach a subtle but crucial layer of this dynamic, the pace of emotional change. If you've ever tried to take the relationship to the next level, moving in together, talking about the future, meeting families only to have the avoidant partner suddenly pull away, then you've likely triggered their internal alarm. What you see as avoidance is actually a response to emotional overwhelm. This is where the metaphor of the boiling frog becomes deeply insightful. If you drop a frog into boiling water, it will jump out immediately. But if you place it in cool water and slowly raise the temperature, it will stay, not because it's trapped, but because it doesn't feel threatened. Avoidants are no different. They don't reject closeness. They reject sudden change. What makes them pull away isn't that you want commitment, it's how that commitment is introduced quickly, abruptly, without emotional warning. They feel like they're losing control. And for someone who learned to survive by maintaining control, that's a terrifying experience. So if you're building a relationship with an avoidant, you don't have to suppress your needs, but you do need to be mindful of the pace. Instead of shifting from spring to winter overnight, let them feel the gradual transition of seasons. That doesn't mean hiding your desires. It means expressing them in a way that doesn't create pressure. For example, instead of saying, "We need to have a serious talk about our future," you might say, "Do you think we'd be okay planning a few things for the next couple of months?" Instead of an ultimatum, it's an invitation, and that helps avoidants feel they have a choice, rather than being backed into a corner. And here's the truth. Avoidants can change, but not when forced. They change when they feel safe. When you maintain a steady tone, avoid harsh demands, and speak honestly without emotional flooding, you create a new emotional climate. And in that climate, they can slowly step out of their old defenses. This is a powerful form of influence, not by yelling or retreating, but by your emotional steadiness. That's what sets apart someone who begs for love from someone who attracts love by being grounded. This not only helps the avoidant feel more secure, it also helps you feel more empowered and centered. And here's the beautiful part. Once an avoidant realizes that this relationship doesn't demand immediate transformation, but invites gradual evolution, they begin to trust more. When space is respected, when boundaries are clear but not rigid, that's when love grows without anyone's nervous system needing to break down. Once you understand that an avoidant doesn't pull away because they don't care, but because sudden emotional shifts overwhelm them, your response no longer needs to be, "How do I pull them back?" but rather, "How can I hold steady so they choose to return?" And this is the foundation of a secure attachment response. A securely attached person doesn't panic or go silent in retaliation. They don't chase for reassurance, nor do they pretend to be indifferent just to save face. Instead, they stay present with clarity and self-respect. They may take a step back, but they don't disappear. They may give space, but they don't lose their boundaries. Dr. John Gottman, one of the world's leading marriage researchers, once said, "The goal is not to fix the conflict immediately, the goal is to create dialogue." This is especially true when you're dealing with an avoidant partner. If you try to force a conversation, you'll trigger their defenses. But if you simply open the door to dialogue without pressuring them to walk through it right away, you create emotional safety. One of the best ways to do this is by applying tactical empathy, a concept from FBI negotiator Chris Voss. In the most high-stakes situations, hostage crises and fugitives on the run, Voss didn't yell or beg. He named the other person's emotion and calmly reflected it back, without judgment or threat. For example, instead of saying, "Why do you shut down every time I try to talk seriously?" you might say, "I sense that when I bring up moving in together, it feels overwhelming or pressuring for you. I'm not trying to force anything, I just want to understand where you're coming from." That one sentence does three powerful things. It names the feeling, shows empathy, and keeps presence without pressure. And when an avoidant hears that, their nervous system no longer feels under attack, and that's when real dialogue can begin. And remember, you don't do this to earn your place in the relationship. You do this because this is who you are. A grounded, emotionally mature person who can speak the truth without causing harm, who can express their needs without compromising their dignity. Responding like a secure person isn't easy. It requires you to sit with uncertainty without rushing to resolve it. It requires you to let go of control while holding on to your standards. And the paradox is this: in that calm, self-respecting space, you become most magnetic. Not because you're trying to pull someone back, but because you're no longer abandoning yourself. So when they stonewall, you don't need to blow up the situation. You just need to slow down, observe, reflect, and when the time comes, you'll be ready for dialogue, not conflict. That is the power of a securely attached individual. Someone who doesn't have to prove their worth because they already know it from within. Staying grounded and using tactical empathy can help you open the door to dialogue, but before they walk through it, there's one crucial thing you must do. Give them space, not vague, aimless space that leaves you feeling abandoned, but intentional, well-boundaried space. Space that helps them feel unpressured, yet still honors your own emotional boundaries. This is where the SPACE formula becomes a powerful guide. The formula stands for 5 key factors to consider when determining how much quiet time to allow an avoidant partner. S, severity of stonewalling. How extreme is their withdrawal? Is it a few hours, a few days, or weeks? The more severe it is, the more space you should consider giving. P, previous patterns. Is this a rare occurrence or part of a recurring cycle? If they've done this often, you need to increase space and manage expectations carefully. A, avoidance comfort level with space. Some avoidants need only a day or 2. Others may require a week or more to recalibrate. C, communication attempts. Did they respond when you reached out? Was it prompt, delayed, or total silence? E, emotional climate of the relationship. Is the atmosphere tense and combative, or calm and neutral? Factoring in all 5 elements helps you avoid the 2 most common mistakes: giving too little space, which triggers further retreat, or giving too much space, which leads to open-ended waiting and self-abandonment. For example, if the stonewalling is moderate, S, they've done it several times before. P, they usually require lots of space. A, they haven't responded to your message. C, and the emotional climate is fairly neutral. E, then you might decide to give 6-8 days of no contact. But this isn't a cold, silent treatment. It's a deliberate withdrawal, one rooted in boundaries and self-respect. How you give space is a form of communication. A securely attached person doesn't just know when to speak, but also when to pause, not because they're weak, but because they understand. When someone needs time to self-regulate, patience is the most respectful gift you can offer. However, Space is not indefinite. At a certain point, if there's no response, you must make a choice. Either gently reinitiate dialogue or accept the reality that they may not be emotionally available, and you need to walk away, not because you've lost, but because you cannot keep loving alone. The beauty of the space formula is that it gives you back your sense of internal agency. Instead of anxiously waiting for a reply, you know you're doing something meaningful. Protecting your balance, honoring the space, without abandoning yourself. Because in the end, space isn't a tactic to make them come back. It's a test of whether they want to return on their own. And if they don't, you'll know that you held your pace, kept your dignity, and refused to betray your self-worth for a half-hearted connection. If you've ever felt confused, hurt, or invisible when faced with an avoidant sudden withdrawal, I hope this video has offered you one essential gift: understanding not to excuse their behavior, but to protect yourself. Because when you understand what's behind stonewalling, you stop chasing in desperation. You stop blaming yourself for being too sensitive or too much. Instead, you learn how to stand still in someone else's emotional storm without getting swept away and without freezing your own heart. Avoidance needs space to feel safe, but you need presence to feel loved. And if a relationship cannot hold space for both, then maturity isn't about trying harder. It's about knowing when to let go. Secure love doesn't grow from endurance, waiting, or overproving. It grows when you set clear boundaries, pull back when needed, and know your worth isn't measured by someone else's response. Never forget, avoidants don't need you to shrink for them to feel comfortable. And you never have to dim yourself just to be held. Real love doesn't ask you to abandon who you are to survive. If you're on a journey of healing, learning to attach securely, and loving without losing yourself, I invite you to subscribe and turn on notifications. This is a space for you, the person learning to love smarter, stand stronger, and respect themselves more deeply every single day. See you in the next video, where we'll keep growing without ever losing our hearts.